I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth and the lies told. Today I'm joined by Mr. Hugh Flynn. He is a widely published journalist and award-winning playwright. He has been a lifelong advocate for the rights of underserved populations, especially people that have disabilities. His searing memoir, Something Special B, is the personal story of a gay man's attempt to become the conservator of his disabled brother and the battles, betrayal, and shocking surprises he's faced. So he's here today and he's going to share with me this very impactful story of I told him before we got started today on recording that I read his intro and about me bio, and I just thought it was such a huge, impactful story. So I cannot wait to hear it. And I do appreciate you for coming on and wanting to share this with my audience today.
Hey, my pleasure. Lethal Venom. How's the audience? Hello, audience.
So, before we get into the main story, feel free to introduce yourself and just tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I don't want to go on and on. I think you did a nice job covering it. I've worked in a range of communication roles over my professional career, from journalist to playwright to corporate communications specialist. I've sold, unfortunately, millions of dollars of products that no one probably really needed for some Fortune 500 companies, which I now regret, and will continue to do my penance. Um, I started the authorship of the book Something Special B several years ago, as in like 12 years ago, sort of when we were in the midst of the process. Um, and so I eventually had a very strong archive, to work from in terms of notes, personal journalings, and frankly, just paperwork, because this ends up becoming well, it's a lot of things. I mean, in one respect, it's a legal drama. In many others, it's a very personal story. I think I would say it's a fascinating, an often humorous journey. It's a journey, it's what it is, into the rights of self-determination, frankly. And I also think it's a cautionary tale of, the conflicts that will emerge when the energies of empathy and non-empathy meet, which makes this a pretty timely story, I think. IBR Review said the book was a testament to the power of advocacy and unconditional love, which I was pleased by. I hope that's true. The initial feedback has been really, really, really super strong. So I've done a lot of things. A lot of the communications work, backtracking a little bit. A lot of the communication works has been in the healthcare space, in and around healthcare and health and wellness. So the advocacy work has been just sort of lifelong, and I chose to sort of emphasize the focus on people with disabilities, but it is certainly extended well beyond that. I mean, I was I was radicalized certainly by my brother Aaron, who is what this book is really about, Something Special B. Um, he was my old, I have several older brothers. He was the one that was next oldest to me. And the radicalization simply was a very natural process for me. It was simply that's what happens when you, or could happen, when you grow up with somebody with special needs. And that sort of, if you take advantage of the opportunity, it sort of forces you to expand your horizon of perception about what is normal and what is not normal, and what is okay and what isn't okay. And it certainly tends to make one, I think, I'll speak for myself, makes one a little bit more understanding, perhaps, of disparate points of view, with limits, of course. Um, and I've always thought it, I've always said to anyone who bothered to ask, I mean, I always consider that the greatest gift of my life is having Aaron in it. And so it seemed like a natural fit to tell this story because it already had all the built-in elements, you know? It had the kind of the beginning, middle, and end, which is very hard for anyone that writes, where do I start? Where do I stop? It sort of was built in. It's got drama, comedy, pathos, suspense. Got good guys, bad guys, people you love, people you hate. Uh, so it's all in there, and the best part about it, it's all true. Absolutely, every word of it is true. Of course, I had to change some of the details of it to protect privacy, and I did that. But the authenticity of the story is unquestioned.
So you have this very impactful story about how you tried to be a conservative for your brother, and it said that when you decided that you wanted to be his conservator, it really tore your family apart. What about the conservatorship was it that made your family kind of fall apart after that?
Well, thanks for the question. Should I say what a conservatorship is? Should I give
Yeah,
that a few
because
words just in case somebody is not quite sure what that is?
yeah.
Um, Conservatorships are, and they're not the same in all 50 states. States sort of have the purview of defining what that is within their borders. In California, where I live and Aaron lived, a conservatorship pertains to adults only. And some of your listeners may remember the conservatorship drama that took place some years ago with Britney Spears and her family. Um, More recently, less drama, but also high profile, was the conservatorship case with Jay Leno and his wife. Um, and so, in simplistic terms, a conservatorship is a legal framework in which an individual sees a court deems that an individual is able to take rights and powers away from another individual for their well-being and safety. So that sounds harsh, and in some ways it kind of is. A very simplistic early thought about what a conservatorship might be is a simple power of attorney. I think lots of people are familiar with that. And that's simply a document that an individual can write and take to a notary and memorialize in a document. Hey, I want you to be able to control my finances. Hey, I'm going to give you access to my bank account. Hey, if I'm hit by a truck and I'm unconscious, you get to make medical choices for me, but I don't want you to pull the plug at least for 60 days. Those sorts of things. Um, and a conservatorship is something that is a legal framework, so it's all discussed, it's all reviewed, and it takes place in a court, in a courtroom. And sometimes they're contested, and sometimes, of course, they're not. In this case, it was. So that's what a conservatorship is. Also, there's degrees of conservatorship. So, for example, I could say, well, now, Noah, or Noah could say, well, now I want you to, Hugh, I want you to be able to pick my doctors for me because I don't know anything about doctors, and I can't get around anymore. And so, would you be willing to help me out with that? And I could say, sure. And you could probably solve that with just a power of attorney document, or you could get into a conservatorship. In Aaron's case, I petitioned the court for a limited conservatorship, which meant just very, very certain types of rights and abilities I wanted to be able to help him with. And this was after he'd been living with me for a year here in Los Angeles. And what happened was we stumbled up to a health issue, which we didn't, which required surgery. And I wasn't in a position really legally to be able to sort of make decisions for him. And it wasn't something that he really understood in a deep sense where he could make the decisions, about, yeah, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do that. And so that really was, in many respects, the precipitating event. When I got there, I said, wow, this is what else could be happening down the road? What else might happen? And Aaron had signaled many times that, well, I live here now, and I don't want to go back. We're all from the East Coast, where you're from, and I don't want to go back. I want to stay here in California. I love it here, and I want to stay with you. Okay, great. So that was the sort of the beginning. As I said, we had the health issue, and so we got the surgery done. The surgery was a huge success. Stressed the hell out of me, but it was a it was a huge success. He was possibly going to be going deaf, and so we had to do an interventional surgery, which was fairly sophisticated. Went down to Cedars-Sinai, had it done there, which is the Hospital of the Stars, because as far as I'm concerned, only the best would do for my brother Aaron, and that's how it all started. So I just to give you a sense for how little I knew at the time, I thought, well, I'm going to try to file for a guardianship. So I started calling some attorneys, and they sort of laughed at me, and they thought, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And in truth, that was absolutely accurate. I didn't know what I was talking about. So, well, that's just for kids. In California, it's a conservatorship. It's a different process. You've got to do this, this, this. Okay, okay. So I talked to, as I said, I had a number of siblings. I talked to a couple of them, and I said, I think I want to do this. They said, well, okay, of course, it's a step. It's a big step. It's going to change my life. I was in a relationship at the time. And so, there was all those things to consider. And of course, there was finances to consider. So I did. I hired an attorney, and I interviewed the attorney. And I absolutely recommend to your listeners that if you need to hire an attorney, you interview the attorney. And you always remember that the attorney works for you. Attorneys don't like that, but that is just too damn bad, in my opinion. The legal profession kind of gets a pass, sort of like the medical profession does, unfortunately, which is a lot of people practice marginal law, just like they practice marginal medicine. And I can say that having been an administrator in a major academic teaching medical center for many years. The stories, the stories. So, hired the attorney, and the first step is you pay money, and a lot of it usually. Well, that's going to cost this filing fees, et cetera, et cetera. And then you put money into a blocked account. It's called a retainer, and you give that money up, and which I did, and then the documents are generated, and in California, the court gets the documents, and then you, as the petitioner, that would be who I was. I'm the petitioner. Am required to send all those documents out to his first of kin, in which case this would be our mother, and then his brothers. So they all got the same documents at the same time, and everybody blew up. Just boom, just detonated. And it was the first of many, many shocks for me. I was shocked. And in some cases, I was stunned. Um, Here he'd been for well over a year at that point, and nobody said anything. Everything was going great, and he was doing great. And as I said, we got the surgery done. Fantastic. The results were incredible. I mean, frankly, he had binaural hearing for the first time in his life, We got him fitted with the right kind of hearing aids, and boom, man, the sound world came. I mean, I got to tell you something. It's just it's you can't put a price on watching somebody really being able to hear for the first time. I mean, really hear. I tell the story, it's in the book. When we walked out of the hearing aid clinic, of course, he had to heal up after the surgery. When we went to the hearing aid clinic afterward, I mean, this is many weeks afterward, and we got fitted for the hearing aids, top of the line hearing aids. And we walked out of the clinic that day. It's on a busy street in Santa Monica, California. And we were walking to the parking lot, and he stopped on the sidewalk and he looked up. And I turned around. I said, "What are you doing?" And I looked up, and there was a jet that was flying way, way, way above us. I hadn't even heard it. I mean, there was street traffic, there was people on the street. Santa Monica's a busy place. I hadn't heard it myself. And he looked up and he waved. I sat right down. There was a bus stop right there. I sat right down on that bench and cried. I just cried like a baby for like 2 minutes. It was so amazing. Wow. Look, things are happening all around him, and being as so observant as he was naturally, it was great to be able to help him hear things too. So the family just went into this very, for me, inexplicable position of objections and hostility. Specifically, your question of why did they do that? Well, why does anybody do anything? I know that one of our siblings, who figures prominently in the book, is Greg. I mean, he has we have a long-standing history of resentment, sibling resentment between the two of us. I'm sure many of your listeners have experienced similar, they can understand that. And he sort of started it, 30 years before, 25 years before, with this kind of mom loved you best thing, you know, which is like that is the biggest flatbed of bullshit, I mean, you can possibly come up with. At some point in your life, you got to understand, mom had a lot of kids and she loved everybody equally. And if you felt certain things, you didn't get certain things that somebody else got, it probably was entirely a financial issue, which in our case was absolutely true. I was last in the line, and by the time I came along, my folks were making more money, because for many years, my dad didn't have a career, just bounced around from, one silly job to the next. So there was money for things to happen, and so he ended up, sort of saying that was some bias on her part. Um, Now, our oldest sibling is also a person with special needs. He has cerebral palsy. And so we had this incredible panoply of diversity in our family, which is kind of hard to really overemphasize. And when the conservatorship documents went out and we had these people jumping up and down, I thought, wow, what is this all about? And frankly, when I first learned about the jumping was when I got served with papers from two attorneys. Two attorneys filed paper. Well, they sent it to me and my attorney, and said, "Well, we object to this, and we're going to challenge this." And that's when we went down the big slide.
That's just such an impactful story, but it's something. So after you were able to get the conservatorship, tell me a little bit more about what it's been like being under a conservatorship, and is the conservatorship still active?
Well, the entire book is about the battle, if you will. It's the in fact the subtitle of the book is A Gay Brother, a Disabled Brother, a Vengeful Brother, a War. And that is what the book is. The book ends on the day of our final court appearance because there were many. So it takes the reader on a first person present voice through this process, because I wanted people to really, if they could, sort of feel the complexity of what it was like to sort of go through this. Because honestly, I mean, Noah, the conservatorship process, going to court and doing all these sorts of things, it has a certain level of complexity, but it was nothing compared to the dynamics we had to negotiate with the family and the objections and the continuances And the continuance is just another word for stalling. You know, we'll stall, we'll stall, we'll stall. But every time something stalls, the money goes up. The money goes up. The cost of the process goes up and up and up and up. It was incredible. And one of the absolutely stunning parts of it for my learning and my journey was that I realized through this process that we weren't all on the same page when it came to our brother Aaron, which is what I always believed. I mean, we all have different opinions about things, we have different political beliefs, but one thing was kind of our Switzerland, if you will, was Aaron. Everybody was on the same page with Aaron, and we all believed the same things, and we all thought the same things, only we didn't. And I was just mowed down by that. I was absolutely mowed down because it changes your reality. You know, you have to. This isn't how the world was, I thought, and but of course that's what we should do. I mean, that's called being open-minded. You know, when you get new information, you've got to work with that information. You might not like it, but you've got to work with it because that's a reality. And obviously, that's a problem for a lot of people in our society anymore. But I took a long time to wrestle with that. It was like fighting an alligator in a wrestling ring. I mean, it was just bizarre and strange in so many ways. And here I thought we were doing the right thing. We were doing the right thing. We were fighting for Aaron's right for self-determination. This is what he wanted. And people were lining up with money and lawyers and everything else to say, no, you don't get to do that, and we're going to stop you. And if this is what you think your life is going to be, we're going to make sure it's going to be something else. So, as far as being a conservator, it has its responsibilities. The court has responsibilities. You have to, in California, you have to attend a training. You have to go down, attend a training, and they give you a manual that's, 350 pages long with all the rules and regulations. A lot of that really pertains to the financial aspects of it, because in the case of this particular conservatorship, I did take control of his finances, which was a good thing because a lot of his money had been misappropriated in advance of me getting that power. That's part of the book, and it's a very devilishly tricky and infuriating part of the book. Um, so that part has its requirements, and I'm not an accountant. That's not my talent, but I keep good books, I keep good records, and so that's something you have to do. Um, Beyond that, Noah, I mean, Aaron and I grew up in CMA. We were always together. I understood him, he understood me. I knew what his needs were, and so a lot of that was pretty second nature for me. Um, but you do have legal responsibility as far as the court is concerned, and so you must behave in a way that is conducive to those requirements. And some people misuse the system. There's no question about that. Um, uh, there's way I could see that once I became a conservative. I could see holes, where you could suddenly, oops, you could do this, you could do that, and maybe try to get away with it. But as a conservator, you have to file an accounting in California that after the first year you do it, and then it's every 2 years. You have to do a legal accounting, which means you have to balance to the penny. Every single thing, all the money that goes in, all the money goes out, why, where, for who, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have to submit that and the court reviews it. And you may get dinged, you may get called in for question, which of course, if you behaved inappropriately, you should be. So those sorts of things were understood. This is going to be part of it. Um, I In terms of our relationship didn't change at all. Not one iota, you know. We did everything as far as Aaron was concerned, everything, you know, before and after the conservative. He could not perceive any differences, except that I had control of his money. which meant he could see his money finally. So, he was he liked his money. So he was very pleased about that. I don't think I've said, and I should have said, that Aaron is really the most wonderful person I have ever known. I have really spent most of my life trying to be like him, in the ways that I could be, and I've really always considered him my greatest, and most profound teacher. So conservatorships have responsibilities. There's no question about it. And if you don't want those responsibilities, don't petition to be a conservator. Um, I already had accepted those responsibilities. It wasn't memorialized into a legal process. Um, I did not like dealing with attorneys. I did not like dealing with the courts. Court staff, often, at least here in California, are overpaid, rude, and ineffective. Um, I certainly could say the same for attorneys. That's a big part of the book. Attorneys, the legal profession does not get an easy pass in something special B. They don't. So, is there something more you'd like me to specifically address in terms of being a conservator?
I guess my question would be, whenever people hear conservationships now, people tend to see it as a negative thing. It's like as a way for people to kind of get control over someone. And it's in a way, conservationships can actually be beneficial for certain situations. How do you tell people that whether if they've never known about conservatorships and have never had a background or history with them, what do you tell people about conservatorships to where they don't just automatically assume that you're doing it just to kind of own them and take control of them?
Well, that's some of what you're talking about is the fault of, I would lay the blame at the way, corporate media has kind of portrayed, popular stories and famous people who've been in conservatorship situations. Um, but there is a level of truth. There is a level of truth to what you've just described. Taking control. You are getting control of certain things. But the way that I choose to look at it, and certainly chose to act as a conservatorship, was these are certain ways to protect somebody who needs some protection, who needs some help. Because frankly, nobody gets through life without help. That's just the way it is. And for your listeners' sake, and for everybody, beyond, most people, if I asked you right now, what do you think your chances are of becoming disabled in your lifetime? Okay, maybe you weren't born with the disability or something, but what are your chances? Your chances are 1 in 2. So most people will become disabled in their life, either temporarily or permanently. So this is something that is not discussed. It doesn't get the type of airtime I think it really should. And if it did, I think some of the misperceptions about conservatorships might, might be lowered. The There's no question. There are certainly cases. I think I spoke to that before. There's cases of people who become conservators who abuse their authority. You know, there's no question about that. That happens.
Mhm.
And some of that is gets down to certain states in the United States and how certain states are better than others at tracking and monitoring conservatorship activity, um, and requirements of filings. They're not the same from state to state, and some of that explains that. Um, and I certainly appreciate, the sense of, particularly a younger person saying, "Well, I don't want anyone to have," particularly someone who's just, let's say, escaped the escaped the control of their parents. You know, "Oh, I don't want somebody to take control of this, or I don't want someone to be able to do this." Well, that's great, and hopefully you'll never be in a situation where you'll need help with those things. Unfortunately, statistically, the chances of you really needing help with something along the way, which is very important to your safety and well-being, is very, very high. So, I don't refute people that say I have concerns about conservatorships because I think that's fair. I think that's fair. I usually say, well, just read a little bit more and see where that goes. I myself have been, Aaron and I both were in court many times where there were people up in front of the judge who were getting their asses, they were getting a new asshole ripped open because they had been totally inappropriate with that. They had not provided appropriate documentation to the court, to the judge, after they were instructed to do so. And I was in court once where a woman just stood up there mute, and her attorney said, "Well, I don't know why we're going to try to get this to you. I don't know why we don't have it yet." And the judge just said to the attorney, "Well, you tell your client," which by the way, she was standing right there. That's the client. "You tell your client that I want that within 30 days, or I'm going to file a warrant for her arrest." Boom. That's it. And I don't have any problem with that. You cannot, you must remember that most people that have we all have vulnerabilities at some point in our lives, and some of us more than others. But everybody, as I said, needs help with things at some point in their life. And it's abhorrent. And it's disgusting that people take advantage of others who are vulnerable. But I'm sorry, that just happens in the United States and elsewhere. And it absolutely should not happen in a conservatorship situation. Absolutely not. But it does.
You had mentioned earlier this kind of ripped your family apart. What
Absolutely did.
exactly about the conservatorship that your family members not like you doing?
Well, that's a good question. A lot of it is in the book. I will say this. There's a couple, there's a plot, there's a B plot, there's a C plot. One of the B plots was, of course, while this was going on, I was in charge. I was running a failing news organization here in Southern California. It was like financially going to pieces while this is going on. Another B plot was we had an ailing mother who was on the East Coast, and I had attempted to get her back here over to California because I felt I could get her rehabilitation and things of that nature, which she wasn't getting where she was in Maryland. And I was obstructed. I was stopped from doing that because another of our siblings had power of attorney for her. So unless I wanted to fight a legal battle across the United States, at what expense, that was a situation I had to live with. Um, I was able to get Aaron out of that situation and here to California because frankly, Noah, he was just dying. I mean, I was going back east about every 6 weeks at that point, and every single time I went, he looked worse and worse and worse. I mean, he was living with one of our brothers in our mother's home, and she had been shuffled off to some warehouse somewhere, and his life was over. I mean, and he was living in a house of ghosts, some living, some dead. And this was having such a terrible impact on him. And I said, we can't, we just can't do this. So I finally was able to get him to California, and I said, look, I'll bring him back anytime he wants. Well, he didn't want to come back. And a few of our siblings said, well, he, mother wants to see him, mother misses him. And I said, well, okay, I'm sure mother misses all of her children. But there was a different standard that was being placed on Aaron. It was, well, no. See, Aaron is sort of has to be here to make her happy. And of course, I said, well, who decided that? Aaron has the right to grow the fuck up and live the life he wants. Don't you think so? And the answer was no. No, we don't think so. And that's where we all went into our respective corners and they rang the bell. And we came out swinging. So I think that was part of it. Also, I do think, well, I do comment about this in the book that subliminally it was there. The lawyers were careful about it, but the fact that I was a gay or an LGBT person and that my brothers had residual homophobia, a couple of them did, I think that was a problem for them, and they sort of flirted with trying to suggest in their various court filings that I was um, morally, unable to provide the kind of healthy environment that Aaron wanted to live. And they used the example that I was not letting him go to church anymore, that he was a God-fearing Christian and he'd always gone to church and all this stuff. Well, Aaron didn't want to go to church anymore, you know, and they just and that happens. I mean, that happened with our dad. I mean, we all went to church every week, growing up. And then when I was about 10 or 11, my dad just stopped going to church. He just stopped. I don't know if he was having a midlife crisis or what the situation was, but I remember that very clearly. And he was allowed to stop doing that. But, oh, this disabled man, oh no, he doesn't want to go to church. No, that's something that gay Hugh is doing, godless heathen Hugh is doing, to him, which was just it was a pack of lies. Everything they said was a lie, but lies get a lot of traffic in this country, I'm sorry to say. And so social media certainly fuels that. So I think that was a lot of it. Um, and it got even stranger because as the process went on and the hostility grew and the money kept going on and the continuances and all this sort of thing, it sort of occurred to me that it appeared that in some ways Aaron was being dehumanized into a trophy, and that this was a fight between brothers that didn't like each other, and that Aaron was going to be the reward for the winner who won the SmackDown, which I got to say just enraged me when I sort of had a sensibility about that. There's also an attempted abduction in the book. I mean, this shit is really just off the charts, and why I really, in large degree, felt I got to get this down on paper. People just really have to read this story. Um, so yeah, a lot of drama, but a lot of love and a lot of humor too. Because Aaron's about the funniest person I've ever known. I can be funny when I want to be, but you know, together we were pretty outrageous.
How's the relationship with your family now? Do you still have a relationship with them? Did they actually come back around, or are y'all still kind of torn apart?
Well, that for initially, there was some sort of cosmetic, sort of, well, we lost, so what are we going to do? But remember, or I should say, I should explain to your audience that just because you're a conservator doesn't mean that's a forever thing. I mean, you can relinquish your conservatorship, and there was nothing to stop any family member from coming back to the court 6 months later or a year later. We want a petition for Hugh's removal. So that threat was always over my head, over both of our heads. Um, so that's another thing. It is a temporary thing. So as far as the relationships, they were already fractured, before this started, and this just kind of obliterated them even more. And frankly, to be honest, I only sustained the ones I did really for Aaron. Because I never shared with him, the alchemy of betrayal that was taking place behind his back. I just thought, why do that to him? Why? Because he loved his brothers, and I didn't want to destroy that. I didn't want to harm that. So, but from my perspective, those relationships were over, you know, and I just had to move on from there. Our mother died. Really, since this happened, I've had a couple of the siblings pass away also. So, no, no, the family never repaired. I think in the book I say this was the end. This was the end of the Flynn family as we knew it, because it really was. It really was. And there's a couple of siblings that we have never spoken since. And you know what? That's okay. That's really okay. Those I describe as you know, below the line costs of a conservatorship. There's the legal bills, there's the expenses, then there's the below the line costs. I wasn't prepared for it at the time, but you know, you have to get yourself gird your loins and go for it.
Since you have published this book and have had the story out, what's been some of the feedback you've received from people that have read the book and have read the story? What's been the overall consensus and critical reviews you've received?
You know, I can't I have to say I have been extremely grateful, very gratified. You know, it's an intensely personal story. I'm sure your listeners are getting that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and but that's what I wanted it to be. I really wanted, in a large degree, I wanted people to be who never met Aaron to feel like they could shake his hand and meet him by reading this book. You know, he was such a wonderful, important person. And as I think I mentioned, I've always consider him such a great lesson and such a great teacher, and how the world would be different if more people were like Aaron, you know. Um, but the critical feedback has I have been so gratified and so pleased that uh, and surprised that some people saw a different part of it and read this sort of aspect of it a little differently. Um, but there's been people and many people. I don't know everybody who reads the book, of course, because it's I don't know who these people are, but the people who have taken time to either send a comment or to leave a review or something like that have really said things that I thought were, oh, I never even thought about that. You know, I didn't set out to write it like that or this. You know, I just wrote to be as honest and truthful and authentic as I possibly could, and to really show people, you know, all the warts, you know, all the unpleasantness of it and all the joy of it. Because I mean, lots of people have said it's a very inspiring story. I think that's wonderful if people feel inspired by it. Um, but I do think it's a story with profound humanity and what we really need to be doing personally and socially, you know, in our world. I think the benefits of living a life like that, you cannot you cannot put a price on that. And many of the reviews have been, well, I mean, a lot of them are just up on there's some Google reviews, but a lot of them are on Amazon where the book is available in Kindle or paperback. You know, they're just so enthusiastic, you know. And it's not people who not all the readers indicate that this is um, either they have someone in their life who has special needs or has disability. They're not. They've read the book for other reasons, you know, because in a way it is a journey. It's a journey inward and it's a journey outward. And it just happens to have certain aspects to it that I have been told by people in the uh, disability community. There's very little in this space. There's very little voices in this space that come at a story like this, you know. So I hope to fill that space up a little bit with the book. Um, yeah, very extremely positive. And as I said, I'm so well, of course you would be. I mean, reaction is of course what it would be. And people have said wonderful things just in their reviews about Aaron, who they never met or didn't know. And so this is just wonderful stuff.
The story's been so impactful. I mean, it's a different angle with a different aspect of what a conservatorship looks like. It's you don't really hear a lot of stories about what happens in these and like the downfalls and like the positive things in it. So I do appreciate you for sharing that with my audience today, sharing this story. If people would like to maybe, if they are curious about the book and would like to check the book out and would like to maybe purchase it and read it, or if they just want to learn more about your story and follow you, where can they all find you at?
Well, there's a lot of information on the author page. On Amazon gives you the option of providing some additional content right there. So there's a lot of information right there. There's information about conservatorship. There's information about me. There's information about Aaron. Um, that is independent of the book. So there's that. I don't do a lot of social media for, I think, very good reason. But I do have a Instagram page, which is really full of Aaron. I really set that account up really to sort of give him a face for this book. And that's just, it's Hugh Flynn 24. Um, it's Hugh Flynn, and the number's 24. That's an Instagram. Easy. And there's wonderful, wonderful, I think, images there make me laugh, make me smile. Or they can reach me on email if they have questions about the book or anything. And that's just my name. And it's Hugh Flynn, author at gmail.com. And I'm perfectly happy to answer questions for someone who might have them. And I think I have had some people reach out to me on what you just stated, which was they wanted a little bit more sort of non-specific information about my experience as a conservator, what that really was like. And I think, well, I'm happy to share that. But to your point, I don't really think my experience was typical. I really don't. Uh, because as I think I said, my relationship with my brother did not change at all. Once that I was still his younger brother, and I had better not ever forget it. That that's just that's just who I was. I just made sure that, the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And then of course, as his health changed years later, we had other issues we had to address, but I fortunately had the power to do it, and also the experience and the know-how to kind of make, I think, hopefully, smart and strong decisions. It's a tricky thing, though. Yeah, I get it. Um, and I myself learned a lot, as I said, and I wrote the book that way. So Hugh gets to look like Hugh doesn't know what he's doing and what he's talking about, from chapter to chapter, because there were times I didn't. And I wanted that to come out honestly. And I want people to understand that's okay. You just gotta find your way, and that's what life is really about in many respects. You've got to find your way. And we did.
Well, I appreciate you so much for coming on here and sharing this story. I think it's a very impactful one and one that needs to be heard. I wish you and
Thank,
Aaron nothing but the best of luck.
thank you.
Y'all, I think deserve it. I think your family, I think missed out on a good family, some family they have missed out on, and but I know you have a lot of supporters and you have a lot of people that have come in your life and have supported you, and that shows a lot of strength. And just being able to come on here and share this story, it shows a lot of strength. So I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing this story with me.
I appreciate the invitation, and you're a very good host.
As I always do with my guests, I will put all of his links in the description box below. I'll put his Instagram, I'll put his book site as well as the Amazon site down there, as well as some links to his book, so that if you would like to go check it out and read it, it'll be easy access for you guys. Feel free to follow me on social media as well: Instagram, TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Noah's Podcast for those sites. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom and subscribe to it wherever you get your podcast from. Available on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere, so feel free to subscribe and follow so you'll get notified of when episodes come out. Appreciate you all for tuning in to today's episode. I hope y'all have a great rest of your day and week. Be safe, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.